All right, looks like we're live.
All right, what episode are we? 20 something? Are we in
21.
the 20s? 21. All right. Welcome, everybody.
Hello, everybody who's decided to join, and anyone who's listening after the fact. This is our 21st episode of All Things Recon, and this is a place where myself and Bobby Wilcox come together to discuss our experiences with recon efforts around the country, here in the United States and in Canada and in Australia. And today's topic is sales and service shake hands, or how do we use recon as a vehicle for improving the relationship between those two departments at our dealership?
Or how necessary that relationship is, right? For it goes both ways, right? But I like
Hmm.
what you said. I like the fact that, is this kind of a vehicle or a hinging point on, really being on the same team when it comes to being, service versus sales with regard to used cars. Often that can be a very contentious relationship, as we have discovered, Josh, in dealerships, right? We probably between the two of us installed maybe close to 1,000 plus dealerships live in person. Just so you guys know, what me and Josh used to do is when we first started this, back in the day, this recon company, we would travel and be on site for the installation of our recon tool in dealerships all over. I would say North America. I've been up to Canada a few times installing our software. So we've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. We see, and coming from automotive, we both come from automotive to some extent, and we've I've had to be that bridge gapper, so to speak. Trying to keep the relationship tight between sales and service.
Yeah, and I like what you touched on, Bobby. That this is that the whole process really does hinge on that relationship, and so establishing it firmly and understanding how those two departments help each other is, of course, it's going to help your recon process, but then in doing so, in working with those two departments to make the recon process more efficient and refine it, you have an
Hmm.
opportunity there to improve cooperation and teamwork across the entire dealership. So
Yep.
recon is a means or a vehicle for improving that relationship. And I think that's one of the many things we can discuss today.
Yeah, and a lot of people think it might not go both ways, right? Because service or sales needs service. You need the service department to safety check your cars, make sure they stand tall, do any repairs necessary, and but service might not think they need sales because there's plenty of customers lined up to bring their cars into the shop. But let's not forget that nobody spends more money on the shop than a used car department. So they're your number one customer. They are an important factor. And those fixed ops guys, they really look forward to that internal number every month. That's a big
Hmm.
number, right? So yes, it needs to be a symbiotic relationship, in a sense. And so it would behoove us to maybe discuss, the importance of those two, departments getting along and working cohesively.
Yep. And I would say, beyond even the fact that the used car department obviously needs the service department to work on their cars. And even, I mean, I've seen cases where that relationship has deteriorated to the point where the used car department just sends their cars away. It's all subletted work. Um,
Hmm.
and to get back from that, you have to start with, small symbols, small actions of trust that help you bring that relationship back. But of course, you'd like to avoid getting there in the first place. But let me digress. I've been digressing. Let me get to my point here. The point being that the service department relies on the sales department to start off that relationship with the customer. So customers are going to come to the dealership for maintenance and things like that. If they were burned at another store and they decide, hey, let's try another dealership for my monthly maintenance, or if they already have a pre-existing service relationship with your store. But you might have a customer buying from that dealership for the very first time, and when you know that, when the sales department can present to the customer, this is what we've worked on with your car, this is the condition that we received it in, this is the investment that we've made in making this car safe and reliable and comfortable for you, Mr. Customer, that starts you off on a really good foot. And you can also use that the um, you can use the chain of investment that you've made. You can use that paper trail as a means of jumping off for your first service relationship with the customer. So
Yeah, a lot of
we
dealerships do build in that retention factor, right? So here,
yeah,
buy a car from us, and your first 2 or 3 oil changes are free, or things like that. So yeah, the sales does, in a sense, outside of just reconning the car, has opportunity to fuel the service side of things.
exactly, yeah. And so much of this industry is about building relationships. So one of the things that we talked about in previous episodes, Bobby, is taking your investment in recon and then substantiating that investment with the customer by demonstrating,
Hmm.
hey, you needed a brake job down the line. You would have needed this 3 months from now, but we went ahead and took care of that for you, Mr. Customer. It's much cheaper for us to be able to handle that than it would be for you on your side to handle an expense like that. And so we've absorbed that initial cost, and of course, that's going to that helps you substantiate the number that you're selling that car at. But then also that's a way for you to leverage that previous work that you've done on the car to substantiate with the customer, hey, this is also, when it's time for maintenance, when it's time for an oil change, when it's time
Yeah.
for X, Y, and Z, we already are familiar with this car. We've already been up in and all throughout it, and we know exactly what it needs on what its regular maintenance schedule looks like. So by proving to the customer the investment you've made in recon, you can help leverage that to a extended service relationship.
Yeah, and that's happening more and more. Transparency is a big thing, and consumer confidence, because gone are the days of hidden information, right? Customers are not going to stumble onto your lot. I promise you, they've been on your website already, right? And you're not going to sneak an extra 3 or 4 grand in what you think is going to be gross, right? They're well educated on what that car should cost, but there's one thing that they might not be educated on, is how much you spent on that car just getting it ready for sale, right? And what a great thing to share, to boost the confidence for a customer buying a used car, to say, hey, we did, we here's the $2,500 we put into this car, you know here's the new tires, here's the battery, here's the alignment, here's, we fixed this, we touched up, whatever. And our tools are starting to integrate that now, right? With our velocity, or our rapid engage product, right? Where,
Hmm.
in part of the vehicle description, it actually goes over to our recon tool, grabs what we did, and we'll put that in a part of the vehicle description. So, hey, this car has also been recently equipped with front brakes, a new battery, an alignment's been performed, and whatever. So that's a huge thing, especially when, used car business can also be synonymous with sketchy, or
Hmm.
dirty, right? So.
100%. That's worth reemphasizing, Bobby, is that first time customers, any customer really, that's going to a dealership, they're intimidated. They are, and they're expecting that the person that they're talking to is trying to get one over on them
Mhm.
in some way, shape, or form. But when
Yep.
you can be transparent with the customer and say, "Hey, this is the condition we received this vehicle in. It did need an alignment. It did need some new tires. It did need a brake pads replaced. However, that is maintenance costs that don't fall on you, Mr. Customer. And you may have been able to find this car cheaper down the road, but can you guarantee that when you drive off of that lot that you're not going to be there in 2 or 3 weeks for some maintenance issue? I can
Yep.
guarantee that, and this is how I can because
Mhm.
I've made that investment and I'm willing to show that to you." And
Yep.
just being willing to show something to the customer that doesn't necessarily like when you're truthful with them and you're honest with them and you give them a piece of information that may not it may not it may not show that car in the bestest of lights. You know what I mean? You're not going to lie or obfuscate information that's important to the customer when they see that you're willing to give them information that may not leverage that sale the way that they're imagining.
Mhm.
It's gonna give you that trust because they're going to see that you're not just going to lie to them in order to get them to buy. You're willing to actually substantiate the value of the vehicle as you see it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think more and more, because of the need, or the consumers being well more educated, the transparency is a thing.
Yeah.
being transparent, forthcoming is a huge thing nowadays. And so which is great because our tool, having a tool like our tools with managing the recon process, and really makes it easy to recover or capture what we did to a vehicle. You don't have to go through a history in your DMS and decipher the lines on an RO to show the customer, and then they don't know what the hell it is because it doesn't make sense, right? It's all in
Hmm.
dealership speak.
Yep.
So, but yeah, that's a great little feather in the cap for the the relationship between sales and service with showing your work and having participating in the sellability of the cars.
100%.
So
That's I think if that's one thing that people take away from this episode, then that would be good. But what else, Bobby? What are the ways that you've observed in the dealership um, that sales and service are able to work together more effectively on recon?
having a good middleman, I think more and more dealerships are having dedicated teams, right? We even express that as even being more important than a tool, right? Having that internal advisor dedicated to doing nothing but writing used car ROs, maybe handling the POs and the vendors on top of that. He's also probably one of the most important people in your process when it comes to a dedicated team, because he's the one you're going to go to when you have a question, you want to know a status update of a car, if you didn't look at Rapid Recon or Recon Velocity to begin with. But I think in years past, when dealerships were struggling, or the service sides of dealerships were struggling to keep the used car department happy, and the used car department was always on the service side for taking forever for their cars. I think with the dedicated team, it's easier. They live off of one another, so to speak. You now have people in the dealership that are pivotal to that relationship, that are almost responsible. Their pay plans depend on it, right? So that internal advisor, he captains the tool, champions the tool, and he builds the relationship with the used car manager, the used car department. So there's my guy. I have a guy in service, not just a crabby fixed ops director that, forgot how much money I bring him every month, right? But here's my guy that, I might go have beers with, or whatever. And I've said that 100. You guys need to go have beers. You guys are,
Right.
I stood up in a 28 dealership conference room, going over some things, and I said, what's I asked for show of hands. What on a scale of 1 to 10? How would you, rate the relationship between your service and sales department? When it comes to used cars, 10 being the best, and I think 5 or 6 was, out there quite a bit. And I said, you guys
Mhm.
you need to go have beers. You need to go figure out how to bridge that gap, even
Right.
if it's a sit down. When they understand each other more, I think the dedicated people can kind of smooth that out, right? I want to, I'm going to spend money on my cars, right? So you buy these cars at auction, or you take them in on trade. You bought it for a good number. Wow, we're going to resell this. We're going to make some good money, and I'm put it through the shop, and they might think, does the shop want to rip their head off on every car, right? Or find everything wrong, or come up with this $3,000 bill to try and turn it into a new car, right? Or can we strike a balance? We want the cars to be safe. We want them to stand tall. And I'm going to be totally honest with you, Mr. Manager, because guess what? You're going to bring me, 150 more cars before the month's over. Right. And all my people are going to survive off of this used car monster that happens every month. So,
Mhm.
having the dedicated team rather than relying on a handful of people whose part-time job is to do recon, and they're miserable doing it because there's a high demand in doing it well, and they're buried with customers, right? It's hard to be in a good mood and, shake hands and kiss babies with the used car department when, oh, you're always bitching and complaining that your cars take forever. Well, what's the problem? Well, I'm buried with customers. Well, here's a dedicated team, right? Here's your go-to guy, and then the dedicated technicians in the shop. If you can, depending on your volume, even if it's just 2 guys, 2 or 3 guys, or maybe you got one guy already and the overflow goes to the main shop if you're a lower volume store, right? Well, at least now there's a technician. And you'll see quite often too, that used car manager will start, he has no problem going up to those used car technicians. They look at this used car manager like their moneymaker.
Yeah.
You know, this is the guy that approves, brings me all this work. I never have, if things are going right, they should be beating down the doors to get on the used car team. And here's the guy that's responsible for buying cars at auction, making deals, are you taking cars in on trade and pumping them through my little 3-man crew, or the used car department, right? And on the service side.
Yeah,
Sorry, I went a little long-winded on that because it fires me up because it's such an important role.
yeah. Well, yeah, I think what you've gotten at there, Bobby, is that a lot of the indemnity that'll occur between sales and service comes down to misplaced incentives, right? So if I'm a technician and I'm just part of the main shop, I'm not part of the used car team. I get a used car. I might handle an inspection for that car, make some recommendations, get the parts pricing together, hand it over to my advisor, and then and if it takes over 2 or 3 hours to get an approval back,
Right.
then I get a customer car, and suddenly I'm looking at a transmission job or something like that, or I'm looking at something that's going to take me several hours to complete. And I've got a customer who's willing to wait the entire day,
Yep.
something like that. Well, then now I have to stop everything, work on that customer car. My used car manager gets back to me with his approval. The parts department it makes the order. Maybe it's not going to come in for 2 or 3 extra days, and then I forget about it. The car just
Hmm.
sits out there in my staging area. The parts are in. No one really cares or knows about it because there's not a tool. And eventually someone says, "Oh, hey, that car. Oh, hey, the parts are in." And then a week later, we finally get this unit onto the front line, which we probably could have done within that week if
Yeah.
we had simply had somebody dedicated to follow up with it.
Great
So
point.
go ahead.
No, I didn't think going into this that the conversation would be the dedicated team is so pivotal in the good relationship.
It
You know,
is, yeah, yeah. I think
I was just going to talk about the importance, but now that I think about it, having the dedicated team, it's your guy. Those are your guys over there, Mr. Used Car Manager, and vice versa, right? So I think that's a pretty huge thing, and maybe moving forward, I'm going to preach that as well. If
mhm.
it really does, sum up the relationship between the sales and the service. There's a distrust too. You can't trust anybody. Or there's you know what I'm saying. So
Yeah. I mean, even if you don't have a dedicated team of technicians necessarily, even having the dedicated writer is great because then the technicians know when that writer comes out to talk to them, it's about a used car. That writer
mhm,
can keep up with what's going on in the shop, and if he sees the situation that I described coming up, he can kind of anticipate that and say, "Hey, no, my guy's working on used cars. I need him to keep
yeah.
working on that. Can we find another guy in the shop who can handle this customer pay vehicle?" Um, but yeah, having that dedicated team, 100% essential. Another thing I would mention, Bobby, that's been helpful, or I've seen be helpful to helping that relationship between sales and service is having some kind of automatic approval underneath a certain amount. And of course,
Yeah.
the big concern there on the sales side is that every car is going to then meet that automatic approval standard. You know what I mean? So of
you
course, oh, go ahead.
No, you gotta be, yeah, on the service side, you gotta be politically smart enough to throw them the bone when they got the cream puff going through the shop, right? If it's just an oil change, filters and wipers, yeah, let's get it done for $800, $600 and call it a day. Don't, oh, this is only gonna cost us $600. Well, let's figure out some other things we can do to this car to make it to our threshold. That's not the relationship you want to have, right? Because this guy's again going to bring you 150 more cars before the month's over. And if you were smart too, I want to be on my gravy train. I want to stay turn and burn. I don't want to try and bury. And this is what happens when we send cars to the main shop outside of the used car team. They don't get it. They think used cars has an open checkbook, and they think they need to cover their ass, right? Oh, I need to find everything wrong with this car. That's not, it needs to be safe, right? But does it need that new bezel, or does it need that, nothing that has anything to do with the drivability or the safety of the car, right? So we're always striking a balance, and I think having the used car team, they kind of get on the same page mentally with the goal, and yeah, you stay on the gravy train. I'd rather be getting on to my next 1.5 inspection, which I know damn well I'm going to get done in 30-40 minutes, right? Drive the car, put it on a lift, figure everything out, and start working on my estimate. So yeah, instead of going gusto per car, let's keep more of a value mentality, right? And then they kind of get it. They know where the used car manager's head is at. And some of the other things we can talk about too is maybe having some daily or weekly meetings with the used car manager and the used car technicians, just kind of stating the goal. and then again reiterating the why, right? We talked about this before, Josh, and I know that's come out of, you've said it quite often. When you're downstream, people know the why, that getting cars done faster isn't just a function of making the impatient used car manager happy, right? Or the miserable people who are always come guns a blazing look for the cars. There's an absolute science as to why this makes sense, right? So if they know that it's not the the bad used car manager, that okay, well, if we get the cars done faster, we get them out front faster, they sell them for more money, then they're selling them faster. Now they got to replace them faster. And now before you know it, you're amping up and growing the amount of cars that needs to come through the shop. So you just, you know, eh, maybe next year or next month or in the next couple of months, there's an extra 20, 30, 40 cars coming through the shop, right? Because we're turning and burning. So,
Yes. Yeah. And that's something that may not be immediately obvious, for your technicians to understand, is that used cars may be a consistent source of income, but it might not quite be a gravy train. But it can be a gravy train, if you've got the volume, if you're turning your inventory enough, then it's consistent enough that those technicians on the used car team know that they're going to be making, a significant sum every month,
mhm,
and they have that reliability of the used car department to lean on, and understanding that that's what's going to give you the opportunity to have the dedicated team which understands that not every ticket needs to blow up, that we're actually trying to strike a balance here with these cars. And I've worked with dealers with technicians who don't understand that, and they really are trying to nickel and dime every inspection that comes in front of them, and I've
mhm,
watched that, how that works out. And then I've seen the total opposite. I've seen dedicated used car techs who have been working with the same used car manager for 3 or 4 years, and they already know what he's going to approve, and they already
mhm.
know that I'm not even going to recommend that. I'll put this in a note, but I won't even put it on a line because I know he's going
Right,
to decline it.
right. CYA, but I know that he's, I'm just gonna, yeah,
Yeah,
document it, right?
I'll make
Good
note
point.
of this, but I'm not going to put him to approve or decline it because I know he's not going to make that expenditure. And
Right.
and and I, if you're really good, you have an A car, a B car, a C car, and the technician already understands ahead of time what the overall parameters for a given car are, and so they'll be able to say, okay, well, that's not going to fit my B car's status. That's not going to fit my safety inspection. Doesn't need the 100 and 340 point CPO
Right.
touch.
Right, right. And Josh, what it is too, it's a collision of pay plans. Um, and that's ultimately what I think kind of the springboard of this contention. But
Yeah,
the idea, one thing I'd like to present, and I know we're going to cut a couple minutes early here, but one thing I'd like to present too is the concept of the pay plans, right? We all know that pay plans drive behavior. Well, I'm already pumping a bunch of cars through the shop. I'm kind of feeding all these technicians, but how do we help get the mentality on the same page, right, to achieve the same goal? I love the idea of making some pay plan perks, whether it's just a little bonus every month for the used car team, right? For the service side guys, get this. So the service guide, make their pay plan component be a function of used car gross,
yeah,
right? So I know that I can make my $500 bonus or a couple hundred, even if it's a couple $100 extra, if it's a small percentage of used cars gross. So if they can make more money on the car that I inspected and repaired, then I can make a little more cheese at the end of the month, right? Granted, you don't want to sacrifice safety. You don't want these guys going the other direction, but right, but at least kind of puts the mentality on the same page.
yeah,
So,
yeah. I definitely, there's definitely something to look at with pay plans there. It's worth mentioning for, I don't think we have any live participants today, but it's worth mentioning for all of our listeners that you and I, Bobby, we're performance consultants with the Rapid Recon team. And so what we do is we'll talk to any of our customers who have our products, who've been
mhm,
working with them for some time. We'll review the reporting metrics and we'll talk to you about what it is that you're experiencing on the ground. And we can have those more in-depth discussions about how to organize pay plans, or how to
sure.
look at your process in granular fashion. So if
Hmm.
any of our listeners are interested, if you're a Rapid Recon or Velocity customer and you want to have a more in-depth discussion about your process with myself, Bobby, or any one of the other performance consultants on our team, please reach out to your account manager and get that discussion set up. That's something we would love to have an opportunity to discuss with all of our customers in more depth.
Good stuff. All right, Josh. Well, I think that wraps up our conversation for today.
I think so.
Everybody,
Yeah.
yep. And so we got the next call coming up third Thursday of every month, of course, going into
Yep.
September.
That would
It
put us
looks
in
17th.
September. Yep, on the 17th.
All right,
Um,
3
I,
p.m. Eastern.
yeah. Well, for all of our listeners, thanks for listening. For the participants that joined live, thanks for joining. This is an interactive webinar, so if anyone's listening after the fact, just come on the third Thursday of every month, and you can talk to us, ask us some questions, and we love to get feedback. We love to interact with our audience, so that'd be great.
Yeah, or Josh, if anybody wants a link to schedule a one-on-one session with us, we can absolutely give you a link. We'll schedule a time and we'll chat anything recon, even if it's just in regards to your store.
Yeah,
So
absolutely,
absolutely
100%.
awesome.
All right.
All right, guys. Thank
Thanks.
you.
Thank you.